Hello Mzansi, and welcome to Farmers Inside Track, Food from Mzansi's podcast series in partnership with Voermol Feeds. I'm your host, Lisakanya Ven. Today, I am joined by Dr. Josef de Villiers van Wyngaard, manager at Voermol Feeds, as we unpack protein supplementation and how farmers can close the winter gap by preventing condition loss in low-quality grazing systems. Thank you so much, Josef, for joining us. Just to kick it off, why does protein become the first limiting factor when field quality drops in winter?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I always ask myself before I make any nutritional recommendations, what is the limiting nutrient there? In winter, it's always a protein. Now, the reason for that, or let's call it our natural felt, it goes into a dormant stage, so it doesn't grow anymore. It's usually after the first frost. Then all the nutrients are pulled back into the roots of those plants for survival purposes. So the leaves that are visible and that's left to be grazed by animals are then usually very low in nutritional quality. And the limiting one there is protein. So that's where that comes from.
And how does protein deficiency affect reproduction and growth performance in livestock?
Let's talk about protein. What is protein? Protein is a building block for, let's say, body mass or muscle. It's linked to many cells in the body of the animal. If there's a protein deficiency, they would then immediately decrease in growth performance. And we see that on body condition score of the animals. Or let's say if you've got a scale and you can weigh the animals, you'll see there's a drop in weight as well. And then also directly on reproduction, because now if there's not enough protein, that whole reproduction action will be delayed. And you will see that in your intercalf periods. So protein is overall an extremely important nutrient when it comes to animal nutrition.
When should farmers decide that field alone is no longer just enough?
Just on the topic, so we're focusing on protein. So when farmers should make that decision when it's required to move over to a protein supplement, it will depend on in which area of the country they are based. So we can split that into two categories. The first one will be a summer rainfall area, and the second one is your winter rainfall area. So summer rainfall is usually 90% of country. The winter rainfall areas are located here at the bottom, Western Cape area, I'd almost say. So focusing on the summer rainfall areas, when you need to start with protein supplementation is as soon as the first frost hits you. That's usually overnight. The natural felt will start to lose its natural green color. It will fade into a dull color. Then you know immediately those nutrients have been absorbed by the roots. And that's your best indicator on when to start moving over to a protein supplement. In the winter rainfall area, it's basically the other way around. So summer rainfall, we will usually start here from April, May, after the frost. In the winter rainfall areas, that will be closer in the summer areas. So that's usually September, October, November, when you will start with your protein supplement on that side.
And how do rising feed costs influence protein supplementation decisions in 2026?
Very important question. I mean, feed costs is always a heavy burden to carry, but it's all about your return on investment. So if you use a quality product, you will get a quality performance out of your animals. And at Voermol, we usually focus on a 3-to-1 return on investment, which means for every R1 you put in, you're supposed to get R3 back. And when we talk about protein supplementation, that performance that you get back or return on investment would be your body condition score that would be maintained throughout the winter. So usually if you do not give a protein supplement on a winter grazing, your animals will start losing body condition, and that translates into loss of body weight. Physically, they're getting thinner. That can spiral very badly. It affects their intake. If they maybe have a calf with them, they'll see a reduction in milk production. Your calf will not grow sufficiently. So it's a nightmare if you're in that position. So with proper protein supplementation on winter grazing, you know your animals are in a good standing with body condition score, body weight. They just need to maintain. You don't necessarily want to see weight gains. So it's a very fine line during that time, but the focus is maintenance, survival. That's the only thing where your protein supplement comes in. Just talking about the feed costs, etc., we've seen challenges on the urea side. Urea is a non-protein nitrogen, one of the ingredients that we make use of in a protein supplement. There were some challenges globally where we saw some price increases there. Luckily with Voermol, we try to absorb as much and try to give back to the farmers, especially with the performance that you see. You will always win on that side with Voermol.
I'm glad you touched on performance there, Josef. So in practical terms, how does a protein supplement solve weight loss and poor conditions on farms?
1/6 is a building block for mass gain. So all our muscles are literally made up of small protein molecules pulled together. So if there's a deficiency, the animal will not have enough protein or energy to sustain its maintenance form. And in an attempt to survive, if you do not supply a protein supplement, the animal will start to break down its own protein, its own muscle, to try and gain some energy. But it's not a very effective energy source if the animal uses its own muscle breakdown for energy source. So that's where you get that loss of weight, loss of condition, etc. So all in all, winter grazing not supplemented will result in weight loss and body condition score loss of the animals.
Speaking of the animal breaking down their own energy, what role does protein and energy supplementation play during drought recovery phases?
So this is a nice two-part question, actually. So we've got drought in there and a combination of protein and energy. So let's first focus on the protein-energy combination supplementation, when would one actually do that? And what is a combination, or that specific combination, called? So we refer to that as a production lick. That would be sufficient in protein and energy. And the time when you start with that is at your, I'd almost say, late winter. So just before your animals start to calve. And that would be in a natural environment, that would be, let's say, August, September. That's on the late phase of winter. Now, the challenge there is not just the low quality of felt that you're sitting there with the limiting nutrient being protein, as we mentioned before. Now we're getting to that late stage where the quantity of the felt is also becoming a challenge, because you've already grazed down your winter camps to a point where you don't have enough dry matter for animals. So now it's not just protein that's limiting its energy as well. And at the same time, during that time, your animals or your cows will start calving, so they're going to start producing milk. And their energy and protein requirements will be higher than an animal that's just pregnant during the winter phase. So that's we're referring to protein and the supplementation. And the second part of the question, why is that important during drought recovery phases? So remember, when we have drought, it's almost similar to the late winter stage. So you have a quality problem of your felt and a quantity problem. Your first limiting nutrient in a drought situation would always be energy. That would be your cheapest nutrient source to provide to your animals. And remember, energy, it's not necessarily maize or molasses or anything like that. In survival mode, in drought periods, energy comes from roughage. So you need to make sure you've got sufficient roughage. If you need to buy in hay bales or felt grass that's cut on the side of the road, that's energy entrapped into that roughage sources. And you can unlock that energy with protein supplementation, similar to what we're doing in the winter grazing period.
And weather seems to be everything in this day and age, constantly changing. How does cold stress increase nutritional demand in cattle and sheep?
So cold stress, let's look at ourselves. When we get cold, you shiver. And when you shiver, you tend to spend energy to get warmer. So eventually you're going to get to a point where you deplete your own energy reserves. And then you're just going to get colder and you're going to lose weight. Talking about the animals, if they're not getting enough nutrients in, they will get to a point where they lose body condition, lose weight, etc. So interesting enough, just using this as an example, but when you're growing out animals, let's say young animals, you would always expect a lower growth rate in winter time compared to a summertime. Let's say the feed, everything is exactly the same. The reason for that is that cold stress factor. So animals just spend a little bit more energy on themselves to physically get warmer instead of using that energy, putting it into weight gain, or let's look at our sheep wool growth or anything like that. So it really does have a big impact. It's called cold stress in the winter times. So very important, make sure that they do have enough roughage, and you only need to supplement the protein, a supplement during that stage to overcome all these challenges.
Is there any risk at all when it comes to oversupplementation with protein products?
Yes, of course, with too much of a good thing is not always good. I almost want to summarize it like that. So oversupplementation of protein, yes, it can be dangerous to our animals. There's specific guidelines on your recommended intakes, minimum and maximum. And please stick to those recommendations, because if you over supplement or let's say overdose on a protein supplement, the animals can get urea poisoning and they can die from that. So it is a risk. But luckily the Voermol licks are formulated to be safe licks in terms of the recommended intakes are very much formulated into that product. So if we take an example of Premix 450, which is a ready mixed protein supplement, it already contains salt and some other raw materials in there that ensures you don't go over that high end of the recommended intake. So the licks will always be on the safe side. However, if your animal is not used to a supplement or any form of lick, the chance is good that they would overindulge or have a very high intake that is recommended. So advice there is, let's say recommendation is put out 500 grams per lick per animal per day. In that case, then you would put half the amount out for those animals, just to make sure they get used to it, because they're going to eat up everything initially, because they might have like a salt hunger or they haven't seen a lick in their life before, and off that kind of salty taste or the smell of the molasses lures them in. So just be vigilant on, let's call it the adaptation of a lick period. So make sure you don't put your licks right next to your water troughs. That could always be a danger. And then start gradually with the intake and not start immediately at the highest recommended intake, just to make sure your animals adapt accordingly.
How do farmers calculate return on investment for protein league programs? And I suspect this is the question that you always get a lot.
Yes, no, it's a very good question. I mean, everybody wants to see results the next day. Unfortunately, with our ruminants, our cattle, sheep, goat, it takes a bit longer to see your result. It's like an investment in your animals. So if you invest now by providing a protein lick in the winter, you will ensure that your animals sustain their body condition right up to calving. From that point, late winter, you'll need to go over to a production lick, which adds energy and protein into that supplement. With that, you ensure that your animal produces sufficient milk. So you'll see a heavier calf at the end of the day. And one of the other measurements to look out for is your intercalving period. So we want that cow to reconceive within at least 90 days after calving. So if she's in a good body condition score, and when I refer to good body condition score, and that would be a 3 to 3.5 out of 5 score, then she has a very good chance to reconceive in 90 days. So this means your cow will give you a calf every year. She will not skip. That is the kind of return on investment that we'll see. So it's a combination of you're going to win a heavier calf at the end of the day because your cow had sufficient milk, and your cow will reconceive consistently because she will in the correct body condition score.
What is the balance between field-based farming and supplementation today?
It's an interesting question. Balance between felt-based farming and supplementation today. Right, so I think felt-based farming, that refers to completely low input cost farming system. So you rely completely on natural felt. And then there is the, I don't want to call it advanced or commercial. It's the benefit of yourself and your animals when you start talking about a lick program or supplementation program. So the main difference there, I've already mentioned it. So felt-based farming, low cost. You just rely on the felt. That's probably continuous grazing. So over time, you're going to lose quality and quantity of natural felt if you on that system, and your animals will also produce less year after year. When we compare that to the supplementation system, where you've got a 3-phase lick program, for instance, and this is the topic today, is the protein supplement, the winter supplementation. Then there's 2 other phases, which we will get to later on as we go on with the podcasts. But your main difference there is your output that you're going to get out of your animals. Remember, we're talking about return on investment. So if you spend 1 rand on a lick, we want you to get 3 rand back out of your animals. So it's almost a no-brainer. Your animals will look healthier. You will have less issues with animals that you need to pull and treat for diseases. Your body condition will be correct. So you're going to wean heavier. You're going to reconceive. So there's a lot of advantages with the supplementation system versus just your natural felt-based farming system.
And lastly, Josef, if you look at the current pressure on farmers during winter and dry grazing periods, where do Voermol's protein-focused products fit in best, and which ones are most commonly used to stabilize animals under those conditions?
This is a very important question. So basically, which Voermol product fit in, and what pressures are farmers then experiencing during these, let's say, dry season challenges during the winter. So as mentioned, most of the challenges that I've heard from farmers is the animals lose body condition. Their calves wean lighter than their neighbors, for instance. And Voermol's products fit in best, and we're focusing on protein supplements. There's a few options that you can look at. So firstly, remember to start with these supplements as soon as the first frost hits you. So we're already in that phase this time of year, and that's usually here from April, May. So the options that you have, there's ready mixes, there's self-mixing options. So if I mention some of the ready mix options, there's 2 different Voermol blocks that you can use, which is a ready mix. The first one is the Voermol cattle block, and that's a 40% protein. And then there's a Voermol protein block. That's only about a 30% protein. So the protein block is a very safe, easy block to use in combination with your small stock, your sheep, goats, along with your cattle. And your cattle block is reserved only for your cattle herds. So we don't want any access to that block for our sheep or small stock. And then meal form ready mixes would be your Voermol Premix 450. It's a very popular product. Feed it directly out of the bag. Retains all the vitamins, minerals, similar to in the previous box as I mentioned. And the protein level there is 45%. Your leak intakes can vary anywhere between 400 and 500 grams a day. Depends on the quality and the quantity of dry felt that you have and the number of animals as well. There's another ready mix meal, and that's one of my favorites. That's Voermol Econolic. So it's also a product you feed it directly out of the bag, and that's also formulated for combination herds of where there's cattle and sheep and goat together. It's a highly safe product, and also contains its salt already, vitamins, minerals, the whole shebang, everything is in there. And what I like of that product is that it's got a very high phosphorus level, higher than your Premix 450. And phosphorus is also linked to growth of young animals and reproduction of your mature animals. Your self-mix option there, Voermol Dundee Leek Concentrate. That is a product where you add your own maize and your own salt to make various mixtures of options there. You make your own protein lick, or you can only make a production lick from that product. That's where Voermol's product range fits in, specifically if you're looking for a protein supplement for cattle.
Big thank you to my guest, Dr. Josef, for sharing his insights. This was Farmers Inside Track, Food from Mzansi's podcast series in partnership with Voermol Feeds. I'm your host, Lisekanya Ven. Until next time, stay informed and farm smart, Mzansi.